Hi guys, I'm Abby Shart. Welcome to Abby's Kitchen. Today we're going to be covering a question that I get asked about a lot, and that is how to fix metabolic damage or a slow metabolism from extreme dieting. This is something that is incredibly common since for a lot of people, weight loss diets are just not sustainable in the long term and often result in weight regain, otherwise known as weight cycling. But why is weight regained after it's lost? And why do some people regain even more weight than what they lost in the first place? The reason for this is what we call metabolic adaptation. So today on the channel, I'll be talking all things metabolic adaptation or metabolic damage, how the body responds to weight loss, and what you can do to restore your metabolism. Before we begin, a reminder that the information in this video is for entertainment and educational purposes only, and you should always seek out the help of a registered dietitian or medical professional for your unique case. Okay, so first things first, what is metabolic damage anyway? While metabolic damage and starvation mode are really commonly used as terms online, I actually prefer to use the term metabolic adaptation to refer to the body's response to long-term caloric restriction or starvation. The term metabolic damage tends to make this seem like a really negative, unfortunate side effect of calorie restriction or extreme dieting, when in fact, metabolic adaptation is a normal and natural survival mechanism. When our body does not have enough energy, aka calories, available to use, it slows down our metabolism to burn fewer calories throughout the day. This is literally a desperate attempt to preserve energy for the body to use for normal everyday functions like breathing, digestion, walking, standing, etc. There are several metabolic mechanisms that influence our body weight. A lot of people might believe that it's as simple as energy in minus energy out, but it's actually a lot more nuanced than that. Based on what we know about metabolic adaptation and weight cycling, the ability of a person to lose a significant amount of weight for good and to keep it off is really up for debate. So let's look at things from a metabolic calculation perspective and consider what would actually be required to change your body weight. When we consider the idea that energy in equals energy out, the energy in aspect of this equation realistically looks more like the actual number of calories consumed minus the calories that are not actually absorbed from the food. When we consider the actual number of calories consumed, this information may not be as accurate as you may think, depending on where you look. For instance, calorie information is readily available from food packaging or calorie trackers. However, according to the FDA, the nutrition information on a food label can be off by up to 20% and still be considered compliant. So the calories that you see on a nutrition label or the numbers you're logging into your MyFitnessPal may be very different than when you're actually consuming. Now, when we think about calorie absorption, the number of calories in food may not equal the number of calories you actually absorb. Rates of absorption can and do vary depending on things like how food is processed and cooked, the fiber content of the food, our microbiome makeup, etc. On the other hand, energy out is a combination of resting metabolic rate, the thermic effect of food, physical activity, and non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Resting metabolic rate, or RMR, is the number of calories that you burn each day simply at rest. RMR supports body functions like breathing, blood circulation, organ function, and brain function, and is largely dependent on genetics, age, sex, weight, and possibly gut microflora as well. RMR represents about 60% of our energy output, aka our metabolism. Now, the thermic effect of food, or TEE, is the amount of energy or calories required to eat, digest, and absorb food. The amount of energy expenditure varies per macronutrient. For example, carbohydrates and fat require 5 to 15% of your energy output to digest, while protein requires 20 to 35%. Then there's physical activity, which is the energy expenditure during purposeful activity like going to the gym or going for a walk or riding your bike, etc. Obviously, this piece is highly variable depending on an individual's unique activity level. And then there's non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or NEAT. And that is all the little unconscious things that you may do that use up energy, like fidgeting or sitting up straight, which I'm bad at, playing a musical instrument, twirling your hair anxiously, etc. This makes up about 10 to 15% of your total energy output. So to summarize, changes in body weight look less like this and more like this. So when our body weight changes, how does metabolic adaptation happen? Well, metabolic adaptation research is largely based on theories like the set point theory and the dual intervention point theory. The set point theory suggests that our bodies have a comfortable weight that is genetically predetermined that it will fight to defend. When we decrease our intake and lower our body weight through dieting, for example, we have compensatory mechanisms in place that reduce the energy output and increase the energy input in an effort to maintain homeostasis. Our weight in this regard is a lot like a thermostat. If the house gets too hot, it's triggered to cool it back down. If the house gets cold, it's triggered to heat it back up. The dual intervention point theory considers that we genetically have a set point, but that it's not a static number, but rather it's more of a range. Outside of the upper and lower intervention points or set point range, physiological control mechanisms get switched on to bring us back into that range. However, when our weight falls within the set point range, these control mechanisms are a lot weaker. To give you an example, if your set point range is 110 to 135 pounds, because the physiological control mechanisms for weight are weaker within this range can be more easily influenced and may fluctuate up or down depending on things like diet and exercise. However, these efforts are more likely to be thwarted if you try to get outside the range. So for example, if you want to get down to 100 pounds or up to 160 pounds. It's important to note that there is no one range size, and individuals will vary in how tight their set point range is. Since everyone's upper and lower intervention boundaries, aka set point range, are different and variable in their width, it helps explain why some people's weights maybe seem like they're more tightly regulated than others. I mean, we all know somebody who can eat anything and they just stay the same weight, while others have an extra beer on the weekend and they gain weight. The former likely has a very narrow set point range, so their body works harder to keep them within that range, while the latter may have a wider range, meaning their weight is more likely to fluctuate to a greater degree. Based on these theories, when we restrict calories and we lose weight below the lower intervention threshold, aka the set point range, a few major energy out mechanisms kick in to bring the body back to homeostasis. One, we have less energy available to push ourselves hard in the gym, aka physical activity declines. Two, we may unconsciously fidget or move less, so our NEAT declines. Three, we may absorb more calories from food to compensate for the lack of caloric intake, TEE decreases. And four, we weigh less, so our body needs fewer calories to sustain that lower weight, aka our RMR decreases. To summarize, all aspects of the energy out equation decline in effort to balance out the restricted energy in and bring the body back within its normal weight range. Unfortunately, it would appear that this is not a precise science, as metabolism, aka energy out or energy expenditure, may decline more than what you would expect for the change in body weight, likely as a survival mechanism to safeguard against body and fat mass loss. We saw the survival mechanism play out in the popular weight loss reality TV show, The Biggest Losers. Results from a 6-year follow-up study on 14 contestants from the show showed that not only did contestants regain the weight that they lost in a lot of cases, but some contestants gained even more weight than what they weighed prior to participating on the show. One of the most significant findings of this study was the dramatic decline in resting metabolic rate after this weight loss, meaning they burned fewer calories, about 500 fewer, in energy expenditure than they did before they competed on the show. These results suggest that metabolic adaptations, or a slow metabolism, is actually a defense mechanism that acts in proportion to weight loss. So for example, if you needed a 2,000 calorie diet at 150 pounds, and the mathematical equation would suggest that you might need 1,500 calories at 130 pounds after you lose 20 pounds, the sad reality may suggest that you would actually need only 1,000 calories to maintain your new 130-pound weight. Ugh, No wonder people who lose weight gain it back. Of course, I want to just quickly note that those were just fictitious numbers that I made up to make a point. So don't go thinking that those are the amount of calories that you need to maintain a certain weight. Anyway, in addition to changes in metabolic rate, our hormones will likewise adjust to compensate for changes in body weight, which can influence the energy in equation. For instance, when we lose weight, a few major things happen. First, set point theory puts leptin, our satiety hormone, front and center as the main compensatory player for decreased caloric intake. Leptin, stored in fat cells, is our satiety hormone and signals to us when we feel full. When we lose weight, these fat cells shrink and leptin levels drop, meaning our normal healthy fullness signals become silenced. As a result, we feel the need to eat more to feel full as our body fights to regain its preferred weight. Now, ghrelin, our hunger hormone, is inversely related to caloric intake. This means when we eat fewer calories than what our body needs, ghrelin revs up and increases our appetite. Studies show that people who try to lose weight and keep it off end up producing more ghrelin than they did before losing weight. Then cortisol, also known as the stress hormone, is often released under severe caloric restriction or excessive exercise. Increased cortisol can slow metabolism and impair the ability to sustainably lose weight. Some studies have even shown that women who consume low-calorie diets have higher cortisol levels and report more feelings of stress compared to women who do not restrict their diet. In addition, when we experience an increase in cortisol, we also experience an increase in our insulin resistance. This would mean that cells become less sensitive to insulin, resulting in higher blood sugar levels, which we know is a risk factor for type 2 diabetes. All of these compensatory mechanisms become common responses to severe weight loss, caloric restriction, and yo-yo dieting, as the body fights to maintain its natural set point weight or weight range. The most common signs and symptoms of metabolic adaptation include things like fatigue, heartburn, digestive stress, increased hunger, sleep disturbances, weight gain, anxiety, loss of muscle, period irregularity, and low immunity. So how can a damaged metabolism be restored back to normal homeostasis after a period of restriction? Well, two of the most common ways to restore metabolism are through reverse dieting and the all-in approach. First, let's talk about reverse dieting. So reverse dieting is exactly as it sounds and is often called the diet after the diet. It's a way of eating that is usually performed after a diet or a period of restriction. This entails progressively increasing calories over a certain period of time to boost up resting metabolic rate back to its original rate. The truth is that there isn't a lot of peer-reviewed research on reverse dieting. I mean, this is a method that is largely being used in the fitness competition and sports nutrition area, and success is largely anecdotal. In lieu of adequate scientific research, I spoke to two sports dietitians to get their thoughts: Chelsea Cross of MC Dietetics and Ben Sitt of Evolved Sport and Nutrition. Now, under the care of a sports dietitian like these two, a client attempting reverse dieting would increase their calories by about 50 to 100 calories per week. They would do this until a caloric goal, weight goal, or a perceived set point was reached. There can be a lot of experimentation involved in this, so it is best to do this with the guidance of a dietitian. But because the progression is so slow and calculated, there is a lower risk of overshooting the desired weight. As with any diet that involves adding calories after a period of restriction, Ben Sitt did explain to me that it is very important to monitor for the signs and symptoms of refeeding syndrome. Now, refeeding syndrome occurs when somebody with a low body weight consuming a very low calorie diet over a sustained period of time dramatically increases their calories. This can cause a potentially fatal shift in fluid and electrolyte balance due to a spike in insulin in response to greater caloric intake. This is often a major concern in eating disorder recovery, but it can also actually occur after prolonged dieting or restrictive eating. Both of these dietitians agreed that a caloric increase of 50 to 100 calories per week is generally safe to prevent refeeding syndrome and not likely to result in extreme fat or weight gain. However, some people can tolerate a greater amount of calories outside of this range, while others need to be more conservative. And this is why, again, it is very important to work with a professional on your reverse dieting journey. Now let's talk about the all-in approach. Now, the all-in approach is a process created by Dr. Nicola Rinaldi, which was informed by previous treatment methods used in eating disorder recovery. It was originally developed to restore hormonal function quickly in order to reverse symptoms of hypothalamic amenorrhea, such as menstrual irregularity, extreme hunger, lack of libido, infertility, and temperature sensitivity. The all-in approach is now often used to restore metabolic function, albeit faster than reverse dieting. One study looked at the resting metabolism of women who had hypothalamic amenorrhea, and then again when they recovered from their HA. And in addition to their hormones returning to normal, the difference in metabolism was an impressive 300 calories a day. Now, you might recall my videos on Stephanie Buttermore's all-in journey. Stephanie had a regular cycle, so she wasn't necessarily trying to use all-in for menstrual regularity as it was originally intended. She was using all-in to help her reset some of the side effects of her dieting past, like extreme hunger, and help her settle into her set point weight. So how do you go all-in? Now, in Dr. Rinaldi's book, No Period Now What?, she suggests that recovery involves 3 main pillars, which she encourages people to stick to for a minimum of 6 months to see a complete recovery. These requirements include A, following her meal plan daily, which aims for a minimum of 2,500 calories a day without a maximum and allowing yourself to eat to full satiety. 2, cutting out all high-intensity exercise. And 3, reducing stress and making time to relax. It's not uncommon for people who have come off of a period of intense restriction to experience what we call extreme hunger and therefore need a lot of calories to recover. This is your body's way of begging not only for enough calories to return to baseline, but also to help replenish itself after months or years of underfueling it. Since the body is operating at a lower metabolic rate while consuming a suboptimal amount of calories, once you jump up to the 2,500 calorie minimum, it's expected that you will gain weight and fat. This is normal. In fact, Rinaldi suggests that weight gain tends to bring people into a BMI of around 22 or more, which is what she calls the fertile zone. Everyone's fertile weight is different, and it may in fact be a lot higher than the weight that you aesthetically think that you should be. The weight gain may therefore be just a little bit, or it could be a lot. You may also gain what is often termed overshoot weight. This is a term that Rinaldi herself really dislikes, and for good reason considering the moral weight stigma inherently attached to it. But essentially, some people who follow the all-in approach find that they may initially gain extra weight, but that as their metabolism adjusts, this weight kind of resettles back down slightly and plateaus. While this does not happen to everyone, and a lot of people may simply plateau at a higher weight when they reach their true set point, if it does occur, it may be for a few different reasons. One is that the initial weight gain may cause changes in fluid and electrolyte storage, which can cause water retention and bloating. 2 is that some people, particularly those who come from a disordered eating history, may have very high caloric needs when they begin all in, as they not only need calories for baseline needs, but also for repairing and refueling damaged metabolism systems. Over time, once the repairing is complete, these caloric needs may drop and regulate to just cover those baseline needs. And 3, at the beginning of the all-in journey, one's metabolism will likely be pretty slow, which can result in some quick, sometimes significant jumps on the scale. But once metabolism catches up and adjusts to the new incoming caloric load, it's possible that we would see the weight come down and stabilize. Like I said, Rinaldi strongly dislikes even discussing overshoot weight, since it gives the impression that it's only okay to gain weight because you'll lose a lot of it once things stabilize. When in fact, gaining weight, even if it's a lot of weight, and not losing a single pound may be very necessary for maintaining health. So what are the benefits and disadvantages of reverse dieting versus all-in? Well, evidence on reverse dieting and its alleged benefits is admittedly lacking. But experts who do use this strategy with their clients find that the slow, stepwise method to increasing caloric intake allows for gradual metabolic adaptation and reduces the risk of gaining excess fat and weight while preserving lean muscle mass. This is largely based on anecdotal evidence and not from actual research studies. The downside is that reverse dieting, like any dieting, may not be appropriate for those struggling with disordered eating, which is actually not uncommon for people coming from an extreme diet or pattern of restriction. Carefully counting calories with a goal of metabolic restoration with minimal weight gain can further perpetuate disordered eating and will not help an individual ease back into a more flexible, healthy relationship with food and their body. There is also a concern that because the goal of reverse dieting is to slowly bump up caloric intake without risking weight or fat gain, an individual may never actually ever reach their body's true set point weight. Instead, they may continue to be fueling their body at a suboptimal level for their unique needs, but stopping when their goal weight or desired weight is threatened by a further caloric increase. The other concern is that reverse dieting does not achieve metabolic restoration very quickly. So for those who are suffering with the physiological health implications of metabolic damage like hypothalamic amenorrhea, infertility, thyroid dysfunction, or other hormonal irregularities, they may not achieve the timely recovery that they really truly need. In contrast, the all-in approach is arguably the most efficient way to restore hormonal regulation, and by default, of course, metabolism following a period of restriction. This will mean improvements in everything from sleep, menstrual cycle, thyroid, hunger and fullness cues, etc. It's also a more intuitive approach that can help you reach your body's natural set point while relearning, often for the first time in a really long time, how to listen to your body's true hunger and fullness cues. In my professional opinion, I consider the all-in approach to be true recovery from restriction. While reverse dieting can offer some significant health benefits, it may not allow for full healing to occur, both psychologically and in some cases physically. In other words, all-in is exactly what it sounds like when it comes to refueling your body, while reverse dieting may not be going all the way, but some of the way at a much slower pace. It could get you all the way, but it also could not. So how do you know if you should go all in or reverse diet to restore metabolism? Well, it really depends on the goals and the health concerns of the individual. A faster reverse diet or an all-in approach may be beneficial for somebody having complications with their health due to a low caloric intake. In contrast, a slow, meticulous reverse diet may be beneficial for those who want to increase their caloric intake while minimizing fat gain and maintaining muscle mass as best as they can. I would argue that a reverse diet may not be suitable for anybody with a past or present history of disordered eating who really should be focusing on regaining body trust, not on another weight-driven diet, even if it is one that involves adding calories to the diet. Some people may choose an all-in approach if they're looking to balance and restore their hormones, metabolism, and their general health at a much faster rate, while also, of course, working on their relationship with food and their body. Whichever one you choose, again, it is so important that you work with a registered dietitian to ensure that this is done safely and properly, especially if you're coming out from a very restrictive, low-calorie diet. Other than increasing caloric intake through all-in or reverse dieting, there are a few additional ways to attempt to improve metabolism. Number one is reducing intense exercise. We know that exercise is so important, but it can become problematic when it's excessive, not supported by adequate caloric intake, or affecting you mentally. Intense exercise will not only burn the calories that you're carefully trying to add during metabolic restoration, but it can also increase stress hormones like cortisol. Cortisol, like we talked about, high cortisol has been shown to increase insulin and blood glucose levels, which in turn has been linked to increased risk of obesity and slowed metabolism. So pull back on any long or intense cardio sessions and stick to gentle strength training, yoga, stretching, and easy walks instead. Number two is getting more sleep. Sleep allows our body to repair itself physically and mentally. Research suggests that when sleep is restricted, cortisol levels rise, which does tend to play a role in metabolism and weight gain over time. Skimping on sleep also seems to further reduce leptin and increase ghrelin, two hormones that are already impacted by metabolic damage. 3 is reducing stress. Now, stress can of course be in the form of intense exercise or lack of sleep, but it can also take shape from other life experiences and factors as well, all of which can increase cortisol levels. So look for ways to reduce the stress in your life by engaging in relaxing activities like meditation, journaling, talk therapy, yoga, or other acts of self-care. So what is the bottom line on reversing metabolic damage? The truth is, if you want to improve your metabolism and fix metabolic damage after a period of severe caloric restriction, there are 2 popular methods to do so. One is a more calculated but arguably less effective method at achieving full metabolic restoration, reverse dieting, while the other is more aggressive but faster and a more thorough approach, the all-in approach. Gaining weight and body fat may be part of the process regardless of which method you choose, and it may in fact be necessary for overall health. Whichever method you choose to reverse metabolic adaptation, it's very important that you're working with a registered dietitian, and if you're coming from an eating disorder history, a full medical team. And that is of course to ensure that you're not at risk of refeeding syndrome. Well folks, that is all for today's video. If you liked it, be sure to give it that thumbs up. Leave me a comment below if you have any big questions that you want me to tackle. Subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time on Abby's Kitchen. Bye!